family instability is not simply an economic problem. Can you speak to that issue?
Yeah, so one of the things that I looked at is some of the data from past decades, and what you saw in 1960, the Black poverty rate was about 55%. In that same year, about 80% of Black children were born to married parents, so born within wedlock.
80%.
You fast forward, and what you see is almost a scissor effect, where as poverty has gone down, the non-marital birth rate has gone up. So
Wow.
now the Black poverty rate is about 18%. And as I said, close to 70% of Black children are born to unmarried parents. So one of the things that I say in the book, I pose a hypothetical question. I said, okay, who would be more likely to be married and have 5 children with his wife? The typical NBA player or NFL player today, or his great-great-grandfather who was a sharecropper in the Deep South in the 1940s.
Let's take a look at that analogy, because you would imagine the more impoverished somebody is, the less stable their families would be, the less progeny they would have as far as children and legacy, the less social structures they would have. But as Black Americans and Americans in general, we're finding are making more money, DK. As they're making more money, our families are failing more and more, especially in the Black community.
Yeah.
And he uses the analogy of an entertainer athlete. Are they more likely to have as many children and a wife as their ancestors from the 1960s and prior? And the answer is no. They're less likely to be married. They're less likely to have children, and they're less likely to have a stable community around them, unless you're calling the Beverly Hills Country Club a stable community,
Yeah, I think parties have changed. You know what I mean? Like, I think back in the 60s and the 50s, that our priorities were different, right? Family was important. You know what I
Priorities,
mean?
yeah.
Priorities, yeah. I'm sorry. You know what I mean? They were important, right? But now we have different ones. You know what I mean? Now it's how many likes instead of going to your kids. You know what I mean? School to a PTA meeting. You know what I mean? When was the last? You know what I mean? Like, people don't even do that anymore. Is that even a thing still? You know what I mean? Because
could you imagine, bro? It's 1949, post-war society. Imagine if we had an integration even back then, and Black folks have the opportunity to go to a PTA meeting. Let's say they're not doing sharecropping, or they're not breaking their backs in a Ford factory making steel or whatever. Don't you know how many Black folks would be engaged in that process if we could? But now that we have the opportunity, we can't even get a lot of the mothers to show up without bonnets, house shoes, and pajamas. They had to make a rule to tell the women to start dressing up when they go drop their kids off. You probably know about that more than anybody.
This guy.
But the thing about it is like, and I'm not beating up on one, but I'm just saying this is where we've gone. We've given so much to our community to an extent through political power and all these other things, but we've only spent that capital on becoming less connected to family. And people will say, well, it's a result of slavery. It's a result of white supremacy. These things were happening at the apex of white supremacy and right after slavery. After slavery, we were the highest married group in the country at over 80% Black people. And then during the Jim Crow era, after chattel slavery, we were still the strongest families and were some of the most highest married people. But we lost all that once we started looking more at civil rights, and we let the government come in and be a surrogate father and daddy government.
Yeah, well, pain and struggle produces something that, that wealth and freedom doesn't. You know what I mean?
Say that again, DK.
Pain and struggle, right, produces something that wealth and freedom doesn't do. You know what I mean? Because when you go through the fire, right, things are getting produced. We look at James all the time. I count it all joy when you go through trials of many kinds, because the testing of your faith produces these things. It produces patience. It makes you complete, it makes you mature. It makes you not lacking anything, because you realize that all those other things don't even really matter. You know what I mean? But when those things start to when your eye is off of Christ, right? You know what I mean? And you're focused on the material things of this world, that'll end up changing your mindset. And you'll end up, putting things above that shouldn't be, above other things. So,
Well, are we saying that, and this is a narrative that white supremacists have been accused of, and you're kind of walking in that direction, that black folks did their best under the height of white supremacy? How would you answer those accusations?
no, I mean,
is it a spiritual issue, or is it that white folks got to keep their thumb on us to keep us married, taking care of our kids, and even economically viable to some extent?
I don't know about all that. All I'm saying is that there's just something special when you struggle, right? And when I'm saying without struggle, you heard that saying, right? It was like, hey, my grandfather walked so I could run. No, my grandfather walked so I could ride a bike, and my son's gonna drive a Ford. His son's gonna drive a Mercedes.
I beg your
His other
pardon?
son's gonna drive a Lamborghini. Then his next. No, I'm saying the higher that you get up, you end up producing a different type of man. You know what I mean? Because if you never have any hard times, you end up producing weak men. You know what I mean? You never heard that?
The answer obviously is the latter, which tells me that it's not purely a financial issue. Sure, economics are important. I believe that particularly for a man to be ready for a family, he needs at the very least three things: one, stable source of legal income; two, someplace to lay his head at night; and three, a stable mode of transportation. But that economics is not the primary driver of why Black family formation patterns look the way they do today.
And Delano, can you talk about the specific 1960s welfare policies that did the most to incentivize single parent homes? I mean, that was the norm. I grew up as an African-American woman under such a household.
Yeah, so what you had in the 1960s, particularly in 1965, is President Lyndon Johnson's Great Society programs, right? This is part of his war on poverty. And what you saw is welfare,
Squires,
which was then AFDC, Aid for Dependent Children.
CBN News.
Aid for Families with Dependent Children. What you saw is a program that previously was meant for widows or women whose husbands could not work for one reason or the other, transformed into an open-ended cash transfer program that just existed in perpetuity. You also saw the feminization of poverty and the racialization of poverty. You have groups like the National Welfare Rights Organization that said, no, poverty is a woman's issue that disproportionately impacts Black women. So you saw, in some respects, a recruitment onto the welfare rolls of Black women, but with a very specific provision, which is that, one, if you were married, you could not get access to this money. And even if you had a man in the house who was not your husband, you could not get access to this money. So it incentivized household dynamics where you had an unmarried mom raising children on her own. That was.
So he's basically saying that the welfare system started, and we're going to get back to him. The welfare system started as something for widows and people who couldn't get better with a man connected to them. It was never meant for single women with children. That was just a paradigm that didn't exist at that time. But over time, they saw this cash coming in. And he's very specific that a certain political party used that as leverage, mostly liberal Democrats, where he said that we're going to use this as a hook to continue to get people to kind of vote in one certain kind of direction, but also make this a woman's only issue, and also make this an issue where we're going to kind of entice these people to focus less on the family and focus more on the government being their family. Very, very interesting. And before we get back to him, I want to get your thoughts on that, DK.
Yeah, so I mean, he's right. The bottom line, he's right. You know what I mean? He's right. I mean, they hoodwinked us. You know what I mean? They found a way to destroy what took so long to build. You know what I mean?
Why do you think the women, and it wasn't just black women, but it was mostly black women, and it affected disproportionately. Why do you think they chose a husband in the government versus a husband in the real world to raise their children? Why do you think that happened?
I mean, it's so many variables, right? So it's number one, the government probably felt more stable, right?
Than a man.
You know what I mean? The government not going nowhere. We got big government, but big government not going nowhere, right?
Now you're obligated to vote for whatever crazy LGBTQIA and trans policies that come out from that party, because now they're controlling the money that's coming to you, because that's your dad. That's your husband now. Am I missing something?
Nah, you all the way right, man. But my man, I just keep coming back to this, man. Is what's the solution, right? And when you came up with this topic earlier, I was thinking about like, what is the real solution, right? And for me, the real solution, right, is it's individuals, right? It's just me, it's just you, right? What can we do to change it, right? Because that's where it starts. It has to start with an individual, right? So for me,
we're gonna get to the solution, but we're still diagnosing the problem here. We're still diagnosing the problem.
I would.
Let's get back to Mr. Squires here and see what else he has to say about this topic. And don't forget, guys, be sure to like, share, comment. If you've seen this impacting your community, where the government has become the father, where men have been marginalized, or the men have not been rising to the occasion properly. The men are just not, and the government has to step in. Leave a comment. Let us know what your experience has been, because this is a very interesting thing that's happened historically and socially that's impacted people to this day. Why is it happening? How do we fix the problem? Going back to what DK said previously. Let's roll.
The only way, generally speaking, that you could get access to welfare. So what that did in effect was displace men, and in this case, black men, from their rightful God-given role as providers for their home. And that set into motion a decades-long sort of pattern of family formation that moved men out of their primary vocations as husband and father and moved the government, both through elected officials and unelected bureaucrats, into that role as a substitute head of household.
And Delano, how do modern, quote, guaranteed income programs continue to exclude or diminish the role of fathers?
Yeah, this is something that I'm starting to look at more. In the book, particularly in chapter 2, where I write about welfare, I start with a story about a program called Strong Families, Strong Futures, which is here in Washington, D.C. And I describe how the pilot program gave $10,800 to new and expecting low-income moms.
So he's talking about a program in D.C. that's focused on new and expectant moms, and we know DC is like 80%, 70% black. So he's talking about the black community here, most likely.
And these moms were married. All of them were African American.
There you go.
And the first person that the Washington Post, when they did a story on it, the first person that they profiled was a woman they described as a 27-year-old stay-at-home mom, now of 3 kids. She had just had her 3rd child. But then it said she was in a subsidized apartment, 2-bedroom apartment. She was on WIC, SNAP, and TANF, and now in this program. And then it hit me that when it said stay-at-home mom, the husband, quote unquote, that was being described was actually the government. Now, she was one of the two. Her story was one of the 2 instances.
The government was a husband, and she was a stay-at-home mom.
Instances in this Post article where the word father was used. One is said the father of her 3 children went along when she took a $6,000 luxury trip to Florida. And the second is when it said that the fathers of one woman's children, that the fathers were not involved in their lives. And that was it. So, and even in the announcement of the program itself, Strong Families, Strong Futures, it was all about providing funding to give new moms, financial autonomy and independence. There was no mention of fathers whatsoever. And I've seen this in programs in Philadelphia, in Atlanta, and now one program is called the Bridge Project, which has different sites nationwide, talks about providing money to moms and their children. And it's all done under the guise of strengthening families, but there's never any mention of the responsibility and role that men are to play as fathers to their children.
That's interesting because it's saying, hey, we want to have these family programs. We want to be able to assist quote unquote families. Man, this is a loaded topic. But when it comes down to the actual family, it's just a single woman and her children that are the focus. And that was something that was brought up during the last presidential election. You had Ice Cube, who was the face, this stupid decision in my opinion, but he was the face of this new America's deal with Black America. And Ice Cube was going around because they had, social scientists, they had professors in the Black community that were trying to push, hey, we need to find out which political candidate is going to support the Black community's initiative to get better with men in the front and leading and the whole community in general. They couldn't get anywhere. They gave it to Ice Cube. Ice Cube began to circulate this idea. He went on talk shows. He went on the one show, I think it's a BET show with Vivica Fox and the one girl from Players Club. I can't think of her name right now. And they destroyed this program, not because it lacked good ideas or it's what the Black community needed, but they destroyed it because they said there isn't anything specifically for Black women. And Ice Cube was like, well, aren't Black women a part of the Black community? And they basically said no. So we have two communities that are kind of fighting for supremacy here. One is apparently winning more than the other. We have Black females or females in general and their children. That's a community. They're the ones who are getting funding, like Mr. Squires. I don't know if he's a doctor, and I apologize if I'm butchering your status. But he's saying basically that these programs were aimed at that niche within the community, the Black community, and the men were being excluded for the same. So you have two communities that are vying. If the Black community wants to do something, it's not Black men and Black women and Black children. It's Black women and their children, and Black men are over here doing something else, smoking weed and maybe playing PS5. So this is where we are right now. And when you look at what happened with the Kamala Harris campaign, how she kind of marketed some things, we had the whole show, and I'll shut up here in a second, but we had the whole show where the white woman was saying about Barack Obama kind of chastising the Black men during the election or during the previous to the election. And she was saying, why are we worried about men at all? This is an election about women. And man, was she far off. But that's what the narrative has become, is men are not even a part of the conversation. And we're surprised when men show up and are no longer participating, or they're voting a whole different way.
Who does it hurt most? Does it hurt the men? Does it hurt the women? It really hurts the kids the most. That's who it really hurts. And nobody thinks about that. Nobody thinks about how it hurts the kids when you sleep with 10 or 12 women, or you mess with, going from guy to guy. You know what I mean? Who's really hurting is the kids. That's it. And that's why our community suffers, is because nobody's really caring about the kids, unless it's a custody battle, right? But they're not thinking about when you decide to go to cheat on your husband or to cheat on your wife and you break the family up. You don't really understand like how much pain that caused, not just to that kid, but really to the whole community. And that's what the problem is. But
we can't even get to that point, DK. We can't even get to the point of getting married. The cheating is happening.
Yeah.
And boyfriend, girlfriend, or situationships. We are so far from the mark that we're having the kids and playing all these games with family, but we're not even families, bro.
Yeah, but
not
see,
real families.
but the issue is, man, is that's why I'm trying to tell you, as individuals, right? When it comes to building families, right? We have to just all you can do is your part, right? That's it. All I could do is be an example for my son and my daughter. That's all I could do. If I could be example, I saw my mom and dad. I saw, they're married almost 50 years. I saw my grandparents married. Oh, 72 years. You know what I mean? I've seen my aunts and uncles. So those were the people that I was able to look up to. So you know what? That's what I'm going to do.
Let's press on for a sec.
Wow. I know, because I've seen interviews you've done, that you get a lot of pushback from progressive Black leaders in politics and media, and they remain silent for the most part on the breakdown of the Black family. Why is that?
I can tell you right now, before the brother even says anything, he's a sellout and he's a quote unquote raccoon, because he's saying anything against daddy government in the form of the Democratic Party. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican, but I can tell you, someone who's right down the middle, who's apolitical, that as soon as you start bringing up these real problems and you stop blaming white people, you stop blaming the economy, and you start looking Black people in the eye and saying, hey, these are the issues. This is the science. This is the data. How are we going to deal with these hard numbers and without blaming everybody else in the world for these problems? It's going to be an issue, because we are literally a plot armor for the liberal parties. It's just a crazy situation, and we're going to lose some eyeballs because of that comment I just made. But hey, we got to wake up, folks, because we are at the bottom of everything right now, and we're not getting any help.
I think quite simply, family formation is one of the few areas that they cannot blame on systemic racism. And their entire framework for activism is built on that. The way I put it is this: they cast all of the problems facing Black America as either the result of inequitable resource distribution or systemic racism.
Ain't that what I just said?
Which is why all of their solutions fall into one of two categories: bigger government or better white people. Now, when it comes to forming families,
he said all the solutions fall back on bigger government or better white people. A more powerful government daddy or a better white government daddy. A better, I'm not going to get too political, because like I said, I'm not political. I really am. Bigger government or better white people. And where is that getting the Black community? Where is that getting us? We're at the very bottom by voting for more better white people. More better.
Yo, you're stupid, man.
Let's jump back in it.
They don't have that option. They can't blame it on, lack of resources or systemic racism. Because addressing this issue would require them taking some sense of accountability and responsibility for repairing the damage that's been done over the last 60 years of bad policy and anti-family values. So I think they would rather ignore this issue, because to many of them, talking about the decline in marriage and the breakdown of the Black family feels too much like airing dirty laundry.
That's exactly
so
what
they would rather ignore it and focus on everything else. So part of the reason I wrote the book is to call these leaders, not call them out in a sense of combativeness, but to say, look, you as leaders, you have a responsibility. And when the NAACP is willing to invest resources to partner with Hollywood, quite frankly, B and C list actors to quote unquote take responsibility for racism, but they won't partner with Black actors or musicians or entertainers or people of public note to take responsibility for our families, that's when I have a problem.
Yeah.
So it's high time that they be called to account and be called to explain why family structure is the one area of racial disparity that they will not touch.
DK, I'm gonna say this. We're gonna continue to lose as long as we keep pushing voices like this to the peripheral and saying, oh, he's just This guy has researched this and he's come to a conclusion. And I'm not taking anything from the fact that he's with Heritage Foundation, that he's on a Christian television network. I'm not taking away from any of that. But these ideas can't grow in a liberal environment. It can't grow in a liberal think tank. Like we have to get our answers from somebody because people aren't telling us the truth. I have a dog in this fight. I'm connected to the Black community. When I look at these answers, and I've been researching this for the better part of 12 years, and I've come to very, very similar solutions. And I take it to my family, I take it to my friends, I take it to my network, I take it to my peers as far as work. And I say, hey, these are the issues we're dealing with. We got to build the community XYZ. Hold on now. Don't talk bad about big white government. I can't even present the problem or get to the solution because a lot of people in our community are so indoctrinated in thinking that solutions can only come from an internal Black person that's voting a certain kind of way, that's acting a certain kind of way, and it's not working out for us. And those same people, big white government that he mentioned before, are the same people that are fleecing us and keeping us in this state because we have to buy the crack from them. We got to buy the beans from them, right? You know, like the what's the one? Anyway, you get what I'm saying. We'll let them roll for a little bit more, and then we'll get to solutions.
Thank you.
Wow. Can you talk about, when it comes to the collapse of marriage in the Black community, about the widespread ripple effects in the Christian community and beyond?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't delve specifically into the stability of marriages, particularly among Black Christians.
The answer is marriage, in case people were wondering. We need to be married and having healthy families.
But just anecdotally, I know several people who describe themselves as born-again believers who have been married and now divorced. There are Christian couples who I'm sure right now are doing their best to instill biblical family values into their children.
Yeah.
And some number of them have seen their children depart from what it is that they've taught them. So I think this is an issue across the church, so more broadly speaking. But yeah, I think part of the reason, again, that I wrote the book is to appeal to these, specifically to Black Christian couples, and particularly to Black Christian men, because this is married Black Christian men, one, embody the types of values that I promote in the book. As Christians should embrace a biblical definition and biblical sexual ethics around sex, sexuality, marriage, and family,
etc. And we're gonna hear his solutions after we talk about ours. All right, DK, fire away.
Yeah, but like I said, my number one solution is, like I said, is just be an example. You know what I mean? As a man or a woman, you know what I mean? Just take accountability for what you can do. You know what I mean? The Bible says train up a child the way they should go when they get older. You know what I mean? They'll be a lot better. You know what I mean? To paraphrase it. But what I'm saying is, but they're looking at you. They're looking at the way that you treat your wife. They're looking at the way that your wife treats you. You know what I mean? So when they see those type of examples, then in return, hopefully that's what they'll go look for. They'll go look, hey, I'm hoping my son, when he gets a girlfriend or gets a wife, that he treats her the way that I treat my wife. You know what I mean? And to me, that's where it starts at. You know what I mean? But if we all start there, you know what I mean? If everyone who wants to make a change starts there and stop worrying about, because we can't change everybody, but all we can do is change us. And then hopefully someone can look at us and say, you know what? Let me do better. You know what I mean? And then that's how we change our communities. That's the way how we change generational curses. You know what I mean? By getting back to the basics. You know what I mean? I think we just got away from the basics. We're worried about, just so much other stuff. It's just so much pressure, whether it's sports with kids, whether it's school for kids, it's just so much pressure, you know what I mean, that I think families are just getting worn out. Dad's stressed out, mom's stressed out. Everybody wants so much, you know what I mean? Everybody wants 2 and 3 cars and a big house, you know what I mean? Where really before, life was just so much simpler. And I think as life became more heavy, we lost something.
Well, DK, I want to push back a little bit, especially from
Mhm.
the men's perspective, and let's just test that theory. So we have a whole generation of young men and even older men that are saying a woman can leave me at any moment just because one eyelash is shorter than the other, can take my kids, can take my family, can take my wealth, half of my wealth, if not more, my home, whatever the case may be. She can't be held accountable by the church because the church is at best a speed bump to a divorce process. It's been given over again to big quote unquote white government because he's truly her husband. What would you say to men that are fearing those kind of issues and fearing those kind of new paradigms? And that's keeping men from really committing and becoming married because they feel like at any moment, if a woman is not happy in this modern world, that she can take him for everything. And it doesn't have to be his fault at all.
Yeah, but you know what? That's
I, I,
that's
s-
that's a bad. I'll let you go, Jay. But really, real quick, that's a bad mindset to have
But
because
that is
God, no,
what the
no.
majority of men are saying, and
Well,
they're very
well,
concerned about that. How would
well.
you? Yeah.
What your issue? But what I'm saying is that God didn't give us a spirit of fear. So that fear is what's causing this all of this stuff. Hey, because this happened to so and so before, so now I ain't even gonna attempt it. Maybe if you do right, maybe it'll be right. Maybe it won't be. But the thing is, I think not like you said, men are all the way scared now. They have a spirit of fear. Like, you know what? It's not even worth it for me to do it. I mean, I get what you're saying, but as Christian men, we can't be fearful. We can't think about tomorrow. Like, you know what? I'm not gonna talk to this person, even though I really like them and things are gonna work out. But I know how these women are, so I know that if I have a kid with them, this is gonna happen. This is gonna happen. Nah, man, you just gotta go do it. You can't be scared. That's my take. You know what I mean? That's all.
We got Jay on the line here. Jay, what do you think? Did you have something you want to add?
yeah, I just think that men just gotta, I think fear does stop men from doing a lot of things, and I think men taking the initiative. I think men are just sometimes they're missing out taking the initiative, man, and it's coming from not having maybe a male figure in their life. I think that the family it starts with the kids, but at the same time I believe it starts with the man. You got to have leadership in the household. You got to have direction. You got to have a plan, and you got to be able to overcome obstacles. If fear's gonna be something that's holding you back, then you are already defeated. You're gonna
That
have you're gonna have fear all throughout your life. And if you think I just think the main thing is just you got to stay focused, and you got to be able to push through the hard times, and when you don't got a vision, or when things don't look like a plan, you
Mm-hmm.
gotta dig down, and you gotta find a plan. You gotta remember to pray. A lot of
So
the
one
young men
question for you
don't
guys.
stand in their Bible.
yeah.
One question for
There
you
we go.
guys, just real quick, without blaming or even mentioning men,
Hmm.
what should the women be doing?
I thought so. My thing, women on the same thing. That you gotta change your mindset, right? You gotta be willing to be faithful, willing to work out the hard times, willing to. There's going to be bumps in the road. The person that you want might not have everything right now. You know what I mean? But it takes time. You know what I mean? You got to be willing to put in the time. You know what I mean? I think people, period, women, men, you know what I mean? They're not willing to put in the time. It takes time to get to where your goals is. You know, sometimes you have a vision, you have a plan, and you know how to get there, but it takes time. You know what I mean? I know how to get to Philly, but I know I it's going to take longer than a minute for me to get there. Even though I know the exact route I need to go, it's still going to take time.
Yeah,
There we
amen.
go.
That's good. I like that. I like that take. I like that.
So let's go back to the video here and find out what he discussed as far as solutions from his perspective, and going from there with Delani Squires.
And then from there are other institutions that I mentioned. I talk about HBCUs,
Yes.
historically black colleges and universities. I talk about elected officials and the limited role that the government can play in sowing seeds that create a culture of marriage, even in neighborhoods where one did not exist. And then I spent an entire chapter talking about the role of media and culture. First painting
Oh,
a
yeah.
picture of how things went wrong,
Oh, yeah.
and then saying this is how things can be made better.
You know,
Wow.
media and culture has done a bang up job in breaking us up. I remember the movie The Color Purple came out, and that is like the feminist, black feminist worst fear. It's a historical piece, so it seems like these things were kind of commonplace. And I remember my aunties, this is back in probably the 80s when this movie came out, right? And I remember, I'm old, guys. My aunties went to go watch this movie, and this was beyond their working memory. So they asked my grandmother who they took with them, and they were like, "Grandma, was this how it was?" Because she grew up in the rural South and in Georgia, and she was like, "No, it wasn't like that at all." The Color Purple, which is the litmus test on how bad black men can be to black women, and you got to run to Africa, and all this other stuff. Once you get done getting raped and everything else from this abusive. And she said, no, that never happened. Now, maybe it was her little stretch of Georgia. It didn't happen. But more than anything, a lot of the stuff that happened out of the media and The Color Purple specifically was feminist fan fiction. The woman who wrote that book was a lesbian that happened to be dating a man at the time that she was writing this book, and Steven Spielberg made it into a novel. But the media also has the power of painting more healthy depictions of the black family. The Cosby Show, maybe other TV shows that have been out there that don't show every man, black or otherwise, being some bumbling fool or Homer Simpson. But how often do we get to see that nowadays, where men aren't just incompetent fools that have to be babied and cared for by their wives?
What was wrong with Homer? You had an issue with Homer?
I think Homer's a good clown, but Homer is the dope. He's an idiot. He's always the reason for his own problems, right? And then you got Marge, who's always stoic and steadfast. And you can copy and paste this from shows like The Family Guy. You can copy and paste this from Home Improvement. Any kind of sitcom that has come on probably in the last 15 to 20 years, the man has to be an incompetent dope. And the women are better men than the men are,
Homer always went to work.
He sure did. Donuts and all, right? At the nuclear factory. But Marge, the stay-at-home mom, she was the backbone of the family, and she was the one that made the sound decisions. But because of the patriarchy, her opinion didn't have as much of an impact, I suppose. I don't know. But we're getting deep into it. You ready to sunset this, DK?
Yeah, we good. How you feel? Tell me. You good?
I just want people who have stayed on to watch us this far to know that it's not about politics. It's not about liberal or conservative, Democrat or Republican. What it's about is diagnosing the problem, talking to the patient, finding a solution that works. We have gotten to a point where we're so sensitive as an audience as Black people, where the doctor is telling us, hey, you got stage 4 cancer. And we need to go in, we need to cut it out. You need to start chemo. We got to get this regimen started. And we're looking at the doctor and we're literally saying, you got a problem with me being Black? We got to get out this mindset that solutions are only going to come from the Democratic Party, only from liberal ideas, or from, entertainers and athletes or whatever the case may be. We have to take the truth for what it truly is, and we have to go from there, point blank, period. And if not, we're going to continue to lose families. We're going to continue to see men seeing these institutions of families and saying, I don't want to be a part of that. We're going to see women who say, I don't have faith in that, because there's no true structure of a man that's there, or they're afraid of the man's power. But what's going to end up happening over time, in my opinion, is if we don't correct this, men are going to opt out and not be invested in it. And we're going to have even lower marriages. Black folks coming out of the Civil War, coming out of slavery, were married at over 80%. Now, Black men are at 39% marriage rate, creeping up to 40. Black women are around 26 or 27%, the lowest married demographics in the country, if not the world, aside from maybe Jamaicans and people from Trinidad. This isn't sustainable. Other cultures don't take us serious because of this, because we don't have families, we can't project power. And when we do, it's Megan Thee Stallion, it's Cardi B, it's Jay-Z. It doesn't make sense. And we're not going to win with this mentality.